My brother tried to destroy my wedding, but he never saw my response coming. Growing up, my brother and I were extremely close in the way that only siblings with a small age difference can be. Leon, being 2 years older, was always one step ahead, the one setting the pace. As kids, it wasn't a big deal. He was just the older sibling, the one who taught me how to ride a bike, how to defend myself, how to talk my way out of sticky situations. But as we got older, I started to realize that our connection wasn't just based on brotherly love. It was also about competition. No matter what I did or accomplished, Leon always managed to outdo me, to be better, faster, and stronger. At first, I didn't resent him for it. It just felt like the way things were. When I made the varsity basketball team in high school, he had already been the captain. When I got into a great college, he was at an even better one. When I landed my first real job, I was ecstatic. But then I discovered that Leon had already been promoted twice at his. It felt like life had assigned us specific roles. He was the golden child, the natural-born leader, the one who always seemed to have everything together, while I was the younger sibling, always trailing behind. For years, I tried to push it aside. I built my own life, my own success. I started a small business in Chicago, worked hard to grow it, and eventually, after many years of struggle, I was able to claim something as mine, something that wasn't overshadowed by Leon. I even met someone who made it all worthwhile, Julia. She was everything I never knew I needed, intelligent, driven, kind, but with a quick wit that kept me on my toes. When I proposed to her, I knew without a doubt that I was making the best decision of my life. When I shared the news with my parents, they were overjoyed. My mom got emotional, and my dad slapped me on the back, already talking about wedding plans. Leon smiled, raised his glass and said, "Marriage, huh? Bold move. You sure you're ready for that, little brother?" It was clearly a joke, but there was something in his tone, something about his smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, that made me uneasy. Julia noticed it too. Later that night, she asked me, "Does he always talk to you like that?" I laughed it off, saying, "That's just Leon. He's always been like this." She gave me a look that suggested she wasn't convinced but wasn't going to press the issue. I should have paid more attention to that moment. It was the first sign that something was off. At first, it was small things. I'd mention a venue we were considering, and Leon would make a sarcastic remark, asking if I was sure I didn't want something more elegant. I'd show him a picture of my suit, and he'd dismiss it with a shrug, saying, "Bold choice. Hope you can pull it off." Every decision I made, he had some kind of comment. It wasn't outright criticism, just enough doubt to make me question myself. Then the real interference began. One afternoon, I received a call from our wedding planner about a supposed change to the venue. Confused, I told her nothing had been altered. That's when she hesitated and said, "Well, Leon called earlier and mentioned you wanted something more upscale. He was asking about switching locations." My stomach dropped. Leon wasn't involved in any of the wedding planning, so why was he making calls behind my back? I confronted him immediately. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. He looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "Relax, man. I was just trying to help." "You've always had simple tastes," he added. That word, simple, stuck with me. It was exactly the kind of remark he'd make, disguised as helpful advice but really a way of telling me I wasn't good enough. I told him to back off, that this was my wedding, not his. He raised his hands mockingly and said, "Fine, fine. Don't get so worked up." I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. The next few weeks were filled with more interference. Friends asked me if I was sure about getting married. A co-worker mentioned that he'd heard Julia and I were having issues. Even my parents seemed to check in on us more than usual. Then Nick, my best friend from college, pulled me aside and said, "Look, I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but I heard from someone that Leon's been talking about your wedding, saying you might be rushing things, and that maybe Julia isn't as committed as you think." I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. Leon wasn't just planting doubt with me. He was doing it with everyone around me. Julia was furious when I told her. "Why would he say that?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. That's when I checked my phone and saw the messages Leon had sent Julia. Nothing overtly aggressive, but little comments like, "I hope Adam knows what he's getting into," And, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. Relationships aren't always what they seem. She never responded, but he kept sending them. I had been giving him the benefit of the doubt for years, letting him push me down and make me feel small because I thought that's just what brothers did. But this was different. This was intentional. That night, I confronted him again. This time, there was no pretending to laugh it off. No minimizing my concerns. You don't get to mess with my relationship, Leon, I said firmly. He tilted his head. I'm not messing with anything. I'm just looking out for you. I stepped closer. You don't get to do this. I'm done with your games. For the first time, he didn't have a smirk ready. He just stared at me, silent. I walked away, thinking that maybe this time, I had finally put an end to it. But Leon wasn't done, and neither was I. The following weeks were a blur of wedding planning, but no matter how much I tried to focus on Julia and the future we were building, Leon's shadow hung over everything. I wanted to believe that our last conversation had been enough to make him back off. But deep down, I knew better. He wasn't the type to let things go. The first sign came when I received a call from my mother, using the calm, measured tone she always used when she didn't want to upset me. Adam, honey, I just wanted to check in. Your father and I were talking to Leon the other day, and he mentioned things have been a little tense with the wedding planning. Is everything all right with you and Julia? I gripped the phone tighter, clenching my jaw. Yeah. Everything's fine. Why? She hesitated. Well, you know weddings can be stressful. Leon said he noticed you seemed on edge, and that Julia might be feeling overwhelmed. We just want to make sure you two are really taking the time to think about this. You're still so young. I cut her off. Mom, I'm 32. Julia and I are fine. Leon needs to stop talking about our relationship like it's his business. She paused again before sighing. He's just looking out for you, sweetheart. He's always been protective. I could have laughed at the absurdity of it. Protective? No, this wasn't protective. This was manipulation. Leon was playing the long game, sowing doubt wherever he could, ensuring that when people thought about my wedding, they thought about uncertainty. I ended the call feeling even more drained than before, but I wasn't going to let him get to me. I had Julia, and I wasn't going to let my brother ruin one of the happiest days of my life. But then the interference became more direct. One afternoon, my wedding planner called again, sounding uneasy. Adam, I just wanted to confirm, are we going ahead with the flower changes? I frowned. What changes? There was a long pause. Leon called this morning. He said you and Julia had decided on a more refined look and wanted to swap the arrangements for something simpler. My head started to pound. We never made any changes. I told you before, Leon has no say in this wedding. The planner immediately apologized and assured me nothing would be changed without my approval. But the damage was already done. Leon wasn't just planting seeds of doubt in people's minds. He was actively trying to control parts of my wedding behind my back. That night, I called him. Stay out of my wedding, Leon. His voice was calm, almost amused. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. You called my wedding planner today and tried to change the flower arrangements. Oh, come on, man, I was just making a suggestion. You know I have an eye for these things. Leon, this isn't about you. It never was. Stop trying to control things. He chuckled. Relax, Adam. You're getting worked up over nothing. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. This is the last time I'm saying this. If you try to change anything about this wedding again, if you spread one more lie, I'll make damn sure you're not invited. Silence. Then, a slow exhale. All right. No need to be dramatic. I hung up before he could say anything else. For a few days, things seemed quiet. I focused on the final details, double-checking everything to make sure nothing else had been tampered with. But then, Nick reached out. Dude, I just had the weirdest conversation with someone from work. Apparently, Leon's been talking about you again. I groaned. What now? Nick hesitated before saying, he told people Julia might not be in this for the right reasons, that she's with you because you're stable. My stomach dropped. Stable? It was such a carefully chosen word. Not outright accusing her of being a gold digger, but enough to make people wonder. I couldn't let this slide. I had to find out how far Leon had gone. That night I reached out to a few friends, dropping hints to see if they'd heard anything. Turns out, many of them had. Leon had been busy. To some he said I was rushing into marriage without thinking things through. To others, he suggested Julia might have a past I didn't know about. He even hinted to a few of my old friends that maybe I wasn't as sure about the wedding as I had claimed. I wanted to scream. He wasn't just a jealous brother. He was trying to destroy my relationship. When I confronted Julia about it, she was furious. Why is he doing this? What does he get out of it? I shook my head. I don't know. I don't understand it either, but I know one thing. He won't stop unless I make him. She nodded. Then make him. The next day, I decided to take action. I gathered all the evidence I had, texts, conversations, statements from friends, and sent it in a group message to my parents. Mom, Dad, you need to see this. Leon has been spreading lies about Julia and me. He's been interfering with our wedding planning and trying to make people doubt my relationship. This isn't just brotherly concern anymore. He's intentionally trying to ruin something important to me. I hit send and waited. There was a pause, then my mom replied, "Oh, Adam, I'm sure he didn't mean it that way." I stared at the screen, barely able to believe it. My dad followed up. Leon's always had a strong personality. But he loves you. He wouldn't do anything to hurt you on purpose. I couldn't believe what I was reading. No matter what evidence I presented, they were still making excuses for him. Then, Leon chimed in. Wow, so now I'm the villain? Maybe you should ask yourself why so many people are doubting your relationship instead of blaming me. That was it. I was done. I responded with only 3 words. You're not invited. Then, I blocked his number. Julia stood behind me, watching as I threw my phone onto the counter. Are you okay? She asked. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and nodded. Yeah, I think I finally am. Leon had spent his whole life making me question myself, making me feel like I had something to prove to him. But now I was done playing his games. The days leading up to the wedding were supposed to be filled with joy. I should have been focused on Julia, on our future, on the life we were about to start. Instead, I found myself triple-checking everything. Every single detail was meticulously checked to ensure nothing had been tampered with. I no longer trusted that things would go according to plan. I had completely cut Leon out. But that didn't stop him from finding ways to reach me. The first sign of trouble came when one of my groomsmen, Daniel, called me late one night. Hey man, I don't want to stress you out, but I just had the weirdest conversation with Leon, he said. I tensed up. What did he say? Daniel hesitated before replying. He asked me if I thought you were really ready for this. He said he was worried you might be in over your head. He made it sound like he was just being a concerned brother. But honestly, it felt off. Like he was trying to plant something in my head. My fists clenched. Did he say anything about Julia? I asked. Not directly, but he kept hinting that you might not know everything about her. I closed my eyes, taking deep breaths to stay calm. Thanks for telling me. If he contacts you again, just ignore him, I said. Daniel agreed, but the call left a bad taste in my mouth. Leon wasn't backing off. He was working to influence the people closest to me. The next day, Julia came home looking furious. She told me, I ran into Mara at the cafe near my office. Mara's Leon's girlfriend, or at least she was. Julia and I aren't sure if they're still together, and honestly, we don't care. But I could tell by the look on Julia's face that whatever conversation she had with Mara wasn't friendly. Julia continued pacing the kitchen. Mara apologized to me. She said she didn't realize how bad things had gotten between you and Leon. But now she sees it. I raised an eyebrow. She sees it now. What? After everything he's done, Julia exhaled sharply. Apparently Leon's been spiraling. He's obsessed with this wedding, keeps talking about how you're making a mistake, and that he just wants to protect you from yourself. I shook my head. This isn't about protecting me. He just can't stand that something in my life doesn't revolve around him. Julia stopped pacing and faced me. Mara said something else. She told me Leon's been talking to your parents, trying to convince them to talk you out of marrying me. That hit me hard. It wasn't just rumors anymore. Leon was actively trying to destroy my marriage before it even started. I pulled out my phone and checked the messages from my mom. Sure enough, there was a new one from her. Adam, can we talk? Your father and I have been thinking, and we just want to make sure we're absolutely sure about this marriage. I didn't bother replying. I was done trying to convince them. The wedding day arrived, and I promised myself I wouldn't let Leon occupy any more of my thoughts. I told myself this was going to be a perfect day, that nothing would ruin it. I should have known better. Leon showed up late, just as guests were being seated. I could hear the whispers before I even saw him. When I finally spotted him, my stomach twisted. He was wearing a suit almost identical to mine, like he was deliberately trying to position himself as my equal. And standing next to him, Mara. I hadn't invited her, and I certainly hadn't invited him. Before I could fully process what was happening, the wedding coordinator rushed over. Adam, we have a problem. I sighed. Let me guess, seating arrangements? She gave me a tight smile. How did you know? Because of course Leon had tampered with the seating chart. Guests were confused. Family members were sitting in the wrong places, and my carefully planned layout was now in disarray. I didn't even get a chance to fix it because just then, Nick ran up to me, looking furious. Your brother just pulled Josh aside and told him you were having second thoughts about the wedding. Josh was one of my groomsmen, and one of the most level-headed people I knew. If Leon had gotten to him, I knew things were really bad. I stormed over to Leon, who was standing near the bar, grinning like he didn't have a care in the world. What the hell is wrong with you? I hissed. He feigned innocence. What do you mean? You know exactly what I mean. The seating, the comments, the rumors. Why are you even here? He took a sip of his drink, unbothered. Because I'm your brother, Adam. I wouldn't miss this. I was about to lose it when Julia appeared at my side. She grabbed my hand, giving me a look that said, "Not today, he's not worth it." She was right. I turned my back on Leon and walked away. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. During the ceremony, everything went smoothly for the first time that day, and I allowed myself to relax. But just as I was saying my vows, Leon laughed. Not loudly, not enough to disrupt the ceremony, but just enough to make people turn their heads, eyes flicking between him and me. I forced myself to ignore it, but inside, I was seething. Then, at the reception, things escalated further. Leon grabbed the microphone. I hadn't planned on letting him speak. No one had asked him to give a toast. But before anyone could stop him, he started talking. He congratulated us first, pretending to be the loving older brother. But then the jokes began. The little digs. You know, Adam wasn't always the most decisive guy. Took him forever to pick a college, a career, a fiancé. Laughter filled the room, nervous but present. He went on, bringing up exes, embarrassing moments from our childhood, even hinting at an old argument Julia and I had early in our relationship. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to rip that microphone out of his hands, but before I could, Julia stood up. She smiled. Cool, controlled, powerful. Then she lifted her glass and said, "To Adam, the best decision I've ever made." And just like that, the room erupted in applause. Leon looked stunned. He hadn't expected her to turn the moment around. I saw it in his eyes, the realization that for once, he hadn't won. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't over. But neither was I. After Leon's stunt at the wedding, I expected him to back off, at least for a while. He had made a spectacle of himself, humiliated both Julia and me, and still failed to ruin the night. I thought, maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to make him stop. But Leon had never been one to accept defeat. 2 days after the wedding, I received a message from my mom. "You need to talk to your brother. He feels awful about how things turned out." I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. Then another message came through. "He didn't mean to upset you. You know how he is." That was it. That was the phrase I had heard my whole life. You know how he is. A lifetime of excuses packed into 6 words. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. A week passed, and for the first time in months, I started to feel peace. Julia and I had gone on a short getaway after the wedding. Just a few days in a cabin by the lake, away from everything. No calls, no stress, no lay-on. It was exactly what we needed. But as soon as we got back, it started again. Nick called me as soon as we landed. "Dude, you're not going to believe this." I sighed. "Do I even want to know?" "Leon's been talking," Nick said. Of course he had. According to Nick, Leon had been running his mouth to anyone who would listen, at work, at the gym, even at a mutual friend's house party. And the things he was saying weren't just jabs at me anymore. He told people that Julia was controlling. "She doesn't let you be yourself," Nick said. "He's been saying the wedding was all her idea, and you just went along with it." My jaw tightened. "Anything else?" "Oh yeah," Nick continued. "He's been saying you've changed since getting married, that you don't prioritize family anymore, that he tried to help you, but—" I laughed bitterly at Nick's words. "You pushed him away," he added. "Unbelievable." Nick paused before continuing. "It's worse than that, man. He's been trying to turn people against you. He told some of our old friends that you're paranoid and that you're cutting people out of your life because Julia tells you to." A cold anger welled up in me. Leon was trying to flip the narrative and make himself the victim. He wasn't satisfied with ruining my wedding. Now, he wanted to ruin my relationships, my reputation, my life. I hung up with Nick and immediately told Julia everything. She didn't seem surprised. "Of course he's doing this," she said. "He can't handle the fact that he doesn't have control over you anymore." I nodded. "I need to put a stop to this." She raised an eyebrow. "How?" That was the question, wasn't it? Confronting Leon would accomplish nothing. He'd just gaslight me, deflect, and turn everything around to make me look bad. My parents were useless. If I let this continue, he'd keep chipping away at my life until I had nothing left. I needed to hit him where it hurt. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I posted a vague but pointed statement on social media. "Grateful for the people who genuinely support me and Julia as we start this new chapter. And for those who tried to sabotage our happiness, you've made it clear exactly where you stand." The reaction was immediate. Friends and family flooded the comments, offering support and asking if I was okay. Some even shared their own stories, things they'd seen Leon do at the wedding, comments they'd overheard. Mara even chimed in. She didn't say much, but her comments spoke volumes. Some people don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. Within hours, the post had done exactly what I'd hoped. It forced people to take sides, and for once, Leon wasn't winning. I knew it had gotten to him when he called me that night. "Wow," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Passive-aggressive much?" I stayed silent, waiting for him to get to the point. "Look," he sighed. "I get it. You're upset. But do you really need to turn the whole world against me?" I laughed. "I'm turning people against you? You did that all on your own." He scoffed. "Oh, come on, Adam. You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Am I?" I shot back. "You interfered with my wedding. You spread lies about Julia. You tried to make people think I was having doubts about getting married. You even tried to change my wedding behind my back. And now you're pissed because people are calling you out?" There was silence before the shift happened. Leon dropping the bravado and playing the victim. "I just wanted to protect you," he said, his voice softer now. "I was trying to help." I didn't even let him finish. "No, Leon, you were trying to control me, and now that it didn't work, you're trying to make yourself look like the victim." More silence. Then a low chuckle. "Fine, if that's how you want to see it." Click. I stared at the phone in my hand, knowing this was far from over. The next few days I kept my ears open. More people came forward, sharing things Leon had said or done. His social circle started shrinking. Friends distanced themselves. Colleagues gave him side-eye at work. His carefully crafted image was falling apart. But the final blow came when I made a quiet but significant move. For years, Leon had taken small liberties at work, padding his work hours, taking credit for ideas that weren't his, skimming a little off-side projects. I had ignored it, looked the other way. Not anymore. I made an anonymous tip to his employer. Nothing dramatic. just enough to make them look closer at his records. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Leon was in trouble. I didn't reach out to gloat. I just watched as, for the first time in his life, he faced real consequences. Julia and I moved forward, free from his shadow, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was really living. Leon had spent his whole life tearing me down, but now, I was standing taller than ever. A few weeks after the wedding, life started settling into something peaceful. Julia and I focused on each other, building our new life together, enjoying the moments that came after marriage, the quiet mornings, the spontaneous date nights, the feeling of finally stepping into the future we had planned. For the first time in what felt like years, I could breathe. And then, late one evening, my phone buzzed with a message I wasn't expecting. It was from Leon. "I messed up. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before showing it to Julia. She read it, sighed, and handed me my phone back without saying a word. She didn't need to say anything. We both knew this wasn't about making things right. This was about Leon trying to regain control, trying to drag me back into the cycle of manipulation I had finally broken free from. I didn't respond. The next day, he tried again. This time, he left a voicemail. His voice was tired, almost hollow. "Look, Adam. I get it. I know I went too far. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was jealous. Maybe I just felt like I was losing you. I don't know. But I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want us to be like this." For a moment, a flicker of guilt ran through me. This was my brother, the same person I had grown up with, the person I had once looked up to. But I reminded myself of everything. The years of being undermined, the chaos on the wedding day, the lies, the manipulation, the way he had tried to tear down my happiness just because he wasn't at the center of it. I had spent most of my life giving him the benefit of the doubt. Not anymore. I deleted the voicemail and moved on. A few days later, my parents invited me over for dinner. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was off. My mom was too cheerful, my dad too quiet. They were waiting for the right moment to bring something up, and I already knew what it was. Halfway through dinner, my mom finally said, "Leon is struggling, Adam. He lost a big project at work and a lot of people are turning their backs on him. He feels awful about everything that happened. Don't you think it's time to move forward?" There it was. The same script I'd heard 1,000 times before. The same plea from me to be the bigger person. To forgive and forget. To smooth things over for the sake of family. I put my fork down and looked at them both. I have moved forward. Without him. My mom sighed, rubbing her temples. "Adam, you can't just cut your brother out of your life." "Why not?" I asked. "He spent months trying to ruin my wedding, my reputation, my relationship, and now that he's finally facing consequences, you expect me to pretend none of it happened?" My dad spoke for the first time. "He's your brother." And I was his, I shot back. Did he ever think about that when he was spreading rumors about me, when he was calling my wedding planner behind my back, when he was trying to turn my own friends against me? Silence. Finally, my mom gave me a pleading look. "I just don't want this family to fall apart." I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. It already has. And that's not on me. I left dinner feeling lighter. My whole life, I had been taught that family was everything. That no matter what happened, you forgave, overlooked, and made peace. But what I had finally come to understand was that family wasn't about blood. It was about who truly stood by you, who respected you, who loved you without conditions. And Leon had never been that person for me. A few days later, I got another text from Leon. "Fine. I get it. You want nothing to do with me. Just know that when you finally wake up and realize how ridiculous you're being, I won't be here waiting." I stared at the message for a long moment before blocking his number. That was the last time I heard from him. Months passed. Life moved on. Julia and I traveled, settled into our home, and built a life that was ours and ours alone. The weight of Leon's presence faded, replaced with something I hadn't expected. Peace. Nick, always the one to check in, brought him up one night while we were grabbing a drink. "So, have you heard from him at all?" I shook my head. Not since I cut him off. Nick nodded, swirling his drink. Think he's learned anything from all this? I chuckled. Doubt it. And that was the truth. Maybe one day Leon would look back and realize what he had lost. But I wasn't holding my breath. I had spent my whole life waiting for him to change, waiting for him to be the brother I had always hoped he would be. But he wasn't. He never was. And I had finally stopped pretending otherwise. One afternoon, I got an email from an old mutual friend. It was short, a screenshot of a social media post Leon had made. It was vague, something about people turning their backs on family, betrayal, and loyalty. I didn't respond, didn't even think twice about it. For the first time in my life, I didn't care what Leon thought. And that was the most freeing thing of all.